Okay, we just got done doing chat's top 1v1 list for players in 2023. Now, it's important if you're tuning in just watching now or maybe watching on a YouTube video that this is not who is the best right now at this moment at the end of 2023. This is who had the best 1v1 record or body of work over the course of all of 2023. So, why do we do this? Why is this extra important, or why is this so interesting to do in Rocket League 1v1? Well, because we don't have the World Championship. You guys know in RLCS and 3v3, it's easy. Who's the best team? Whoever wins Worlds at the end of the year, whoever won the majors. It's much easier to tell. We have official Psyonix support for 3v3. But the problem with 1v1 is we don't have that. We never have perfect attendance at every tournament, so it's hard to say if somebody who didn't show up would have won. It's hard to compare the tournaments, because who's to say one tournament is more important over the other? And it's not often supported by our game dev Psyonix, and it's hard to weigh online play versus LAN. But if you guys watch other esports, I don't watch a ton of others, but I do watch one other esport that is very similar to this, has a lot of the same things, and that is Melee. I don't know if any of you guys watch Melee. Super Smash Bros. Melee is not supported by their devs, even worse than Rocket League 1v1 for sure. I mean, we just had Saltmine, $100,000 prize pool. So Psyonix does support us a little bit. Nintendo pretty much actively fights against Melee. But what Melee does at the end of every year, if you guys don't know, is they have a community ranking. They have a ton of people rank all the players from, I think, 100 to 1, and they use that to decide who had the best year. And they do this with a ton of people, and they weigh it super heavily. Everybody in the whole community agrees that whoever is community ranked top 1 is the best player, is the absolute best player. So this is something that I've always felt like we could do in theory for 1v1. We could get everybody a ton of respected community members, which I think is what Melee does, and we could come up with each year's best player. But for now, we just did 10. We didn't do 100. We just did 10, and so we took it a little bit easy. But I just wanted to bring this up because maybe it's something we could do in the future. And I'll get into what I rated my list on. My list is rated mostly on tournaments, but also a little bit of show matches. So what tournaments happened in 2023? We already talked about this with the chat that I was actually slightly wrong. I included the 1v1 World Cup because I made the mistake of looking at the YouTube videos and seeing that some of them came in January, which was dumb because it was played in December. So it shouldn't have counted. I included it. A cursory glance over my list. I don't think it changes my list too much based on how they those results. But anyways, the other ones all happened in 2023. And I kind of have these generally ordered from what I value as the most important tournament win to the least important tournament win. So Fearfest Junior was a tournament that had like 4 people invited, low prize pool, no qualifiers. That would be kind of towards the end. And then the Saltmine 3 final, obviously, biggest prize pool, biggest tournament ever. Everybody could have qualified if they could have. Whoever won that, I weighted the highest. And there's lots of other tournaments that happened through all that. Shotcast Duels, Fear Fiesta, the Rule 1v1 Invitational, the Gamers 8 1v1s. I counted as part of it. I think everybody thinks that those are big enough 1v1s, even though they're not technically just 1v1 matches. And then the Ranked Royale. And then, of course, the 1v1 World Cup, which technically didn't happen, but I did include in the slides. So we already went through you guys' top 10. We'll show chat's top 10 at the end, compare it to mine. But, oh yeah, there's also another thing I wanted to talk about. What show matches happened? A lot of different show matches happened in 2023. I didn't include all of them. The biggest ones, though, were the Zen streak. The Zen 1v1 streak, I think, is relevant enough, almost to like a level of a tournament, if not even higher, because it's huge. The cultural significance of the 1v1 streak was massive. Much bigger than many of the tournaments I even listed, I would argue. So now we get into my honorable mentions. Now, my honorable mentions coming up next are not necessarily the players who finished like 11, 12, 13. A lot of people do that, where they'll just say, oh, my honorable mentions for top 23 are just the top 10 extended. It's kind of that, but not fully, and you'll see why. So who did I can't remember fully who I put as my first, but yes, my first honorable mention for 2023. All the YouTube fans are going to love me for it, I assume, which is Dark, because Dark is one of the most exciting 1v1ers to watch in the game. It's very clear when Dark is playing in matches, everybody tunes up to see him. But the reality is, I mean, he's not a top 10 1v winner. He wouldn't show up in the top 10 1v1, but everybody loves to watch him. And so I think definitely his performance in 1v1 over the year is definitely worth an honorable mention. And I wouldn't even say that he's like, 11, 12, 13 or anything like that. But I had more honorable mentions, not just Stark. Also, Wavy. Wavy, I saw in chat earlier, if Wavy was expecting to be in the top 10, unfortunately, he is not. But he surged late, and it was definitely worthy of a mention. If it were the past 6 months or something, I think Wavy's in there clearly. But it is a full year ranking, and Wavy took a while to break in to that top 5 of North America. But I wanted to make sure he got a shout out because he's a guy who's been grinding tournaments forever. I mean, it's funny looking back now, he played in so many of those like $50 1v1 tournaments, which everyone thought was kind of like, oh, that's just, a top 10 North American player just farming these 1v1 events that nobody shows up to. And now we're realizing, no, this was like maybe the second best North American 1v1er who was just farming these $50 tournaments. I mean, it's unfortunate for anybody who had to play in those because you were going up against one of, if not, top 3, 4. I haven't really thought about it in North America, but Wavy, absolutely insane performance this year. Huge surge late, not enough to get into my personal top 10, but I want to make sure we talked about him. And then I also have Diaz and Yan. I don't think you guys had Diaz and Yan in your guys' list, but I wanted to shout out both of them. I think if you combined both of their years, then you'd have a top 10 player. Yan in his show matches and his early stuff, and then the finish from Diaz in the Salt Mine. If you combine them both, then it'd be one, it'd be both worthy of being in the top 10. But separately, I think Diaz had, kind of an invisible first half of his year, and Yan had a little bit of a rough time in tournaments and not the best finish. So I believe those are the end of my honorable mentions. I don't have my guide here. I'm just trying to remember my list. So I think we get into number 10 now. Number 10. So I have 10. You guys did not have Jack. It wasn't close. The reason why I have Jack is because of his early on 1v1s. I think the Ranked Royale and Fearfest Jr., it was around the time that Jack was still confidently in the top 4. And it wasn't until later in this year that he kind of dropped out and had a tough finish to the Salt Mine. Who knows what he could have done if he was able to play Salt Mine 2. Maybe he would have made it into that last final. I have him listed as basically not available because he didn't make it into the final, but he did play that final pool play after requalifying for it and was clearly, one of North America's top players, but not enough to be any higher than 10. I could see Diaz getting put in here. You guys put Fatira. I think Fatira is too high of recency bias. If you ask me, Fatira should not necessarily be in here just because it's a full year list. Jack had a little bit better early year. But anyways, I had Jack at number 10. Jack at number 10. And at number 9, who put Fatira at number 10? Chat did. Number 9, I have Chronic. You guys didn't even list Chronic, which I'll be honest, is pretty surprising to me. I know I might be slightly North American biased. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about Chronic. But Chronic getting second at Chalkcast Duels was huge. You guys dropping some L Fears. But Chronic spent the time as North America's best 1v1 player. I don't know if you guys remember, but Chalkcast Duels was a huge event. I mean, outside of Salt Mine 1, 2, or Salt Mine 3, stage 1, 2 in the final, Chalkcast Duels was definitely the next biggest tournament. And it was a 1v1 tournament that happened on essentially LAN. On essentially LAN because I think everybody was in the same place after Worlds, or I think it was after Worlds before Gamers 8. And so everyone was both wanting to play 1v1 and playing cross-server. So this was a tournament that was like the closest thing we've had to a LAN where both North America and EU were playing against each other, something that Salt Mine 3 didn't even have. So I weighed Chalkcast Duels as well as Fear Fiesta, which was my smaller version of it, very highly. And Chronic only lost to Rawas in Fear Fiesta, which got him knocked out, tied for 5th because it was single elimination. And then Chalkcast Duels got second to only Moxie. Is he? He is 0-1 in the Zen streak. Was he in the original Zen streak? I tried to make sure I grabbed everybody who was in the Zen streak. Was Chronic in the original Zen streak? I don't think he was. I'll try and pull up his RL duels real quick to double check. Because if he played Zen afterwards. I didn't just include all of the 1v1s that Zen played. I'm looking through his. Yeah, okay. He is not in the list. So he probably played Zen eventually, but he wasn't part of the Zen streak, which I think was really the time in which Zen was playing his best and which everyone was most focused on that matchup. He lost right after the Rawas match. Oh, okay. So it was right after. So I had Chronic at number 2. Fear a Chronic Glazer. Guys, Chronic spent time, like I said, after Chalkcast Duels, people were saying Chronic was the best 1v1er in North America, which would mean to say, like, if you were to put any North American 1v1er on there, it would be Chronic. That's over Daniel, over First Killer, over Jack. So I had Chronic at number 9. You guys didn't even think about him at all. No, I don't even think we saw any votes for him towards the end of there. And I feel like you must have just forgot about Chalkcast Duels, because to me, that was a huge tournament. So we'll move on. After number 9, I have TRK. You guys had TRK as well. I think you guys might have had TRK a little bit higher, but this gives you a good idea of why TRK is so low. I think a lot of people will probably be surprised to see TRK as low as 8, only because he's obviously very good. His Salt Mine Stage 1 and final, he didn't make it into that top 4. He ended up losing in the round before that. He did get top 3 in Salt Mine Stage 2, but really, he just kind of didn't play 1v1. So that's why he's only down at number 8. I see a lot of L's in chat. I don't know if they're saying L because he's too high or low, but basically, TRK, had he played in more things, I think would probably end up being higher. The 1v1 World Cup, as I pointed out, technically doesn't count, but he did win the 1v1 World Cup, and he did go 3-1 at Gamers 8, only losing to Beast Mode, I think. But certainly was considered, one of the best players the way he was playing on LAN there. Just he wasn't involved in more things. Is this list purely results-based or your personal preference? I think naturally it's going to include a little bit of personal preference from me, but I tried to make it as results-based as I could. So now, number 7. I have First Killer. I think you guys had First Killer around here as well. I think that coming away with a Salt Mine win in any stage, Salt Mine Stage 1, 2, or the final, is huge. I think to not have any one of those guys in the top 10 would have been insane. And I think both I and you guys included everyone who won a Salt Mine stage in the top 10. But I do think that considering the rest of First Killer's performances throughout the whole year, he is going to be the lowest of the people who did win a Salt Mine stage. So he won the first stage, he completely disappeared in the second one, and then pushed back and lost only to Daniel in the Salt Mine final. So it was not an essential second. He really shouldn't have lost earlier in order to force himself onto Daniel's side of the bracket. But either way, a loss to Daniel to eliminate him, to get third. Didn't do well in the Chalkcast Duels. I don't know if he's ever had a ton of great performances cross-region, which is this tournament was cross-region. Didn't play in the Fear Fiesta, and then had a fine Gamers 8. I think he beat a couple people who he definitely should have beat, but didn't really clutch out some of the tougher games. And so that's what has First Killer at number 7. So the reason why he's probably over like a TRK is because he did win a Salt Mine. He won a Salt Mine. It is much easier to win a Salt Mine in North America. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that it's equal to the Salt Mines earlier that, TRK did not win in, but he also never made it to a final. And especially if we take out the 1v1 World Cup, basically TRK just completely absent, really, from 1v1. So now we move on to number 6. Number 6, I have Nupo. I've got Nupo at number 6. If you guys remember, he had obviously a good finish to Salt Mine. I think he's going to be fresh in everybody's head because he lost in the grand final of Salt Mine to Nas. Didn't have a great stage 2 alongside, I think him and Zen both had a pretty poor performance in that pool. Made it tied for third in the stage 1. A terrible Chalkcast Duels. If you guys remember, the Chalkcast Duels happened right before Gamers 8, which you'll see does not have a record for because he didn't even play in it. He didn't play in it because TRK took over for him, even though it was expected to be Nupo before Chalkcast Duels. He had such a bad Chalkcast Duels. I think he didn't win a game. I think he just lost out immediately, that they said, screw it, TRK is going to play him for us instead of you. So I think had he been able to clutch out here a little bit, had he played Fear Fiesta, and maybe, had a couple more wins in Gamers 8, could have pushed higher. But he did finish really strong. And so that's why I have Nupo at number 6. Now, I think you guys probably have a general idea of who is left, because there has been a very consistent top 4 over the course of the whole year. But a wild card player potentially could have pushed into the top 4. Somebody who finished really, really strong as you could ever possibly finish, if you ask me, but not strong enough to push into the top 4. So I have Nas at number 5. I think you guys had Nupo at 5, Nas at 6. I swap them. I highly, highly value Assault Mine Stage 2 and Assault Mine Final Win. These 3 matches are the biggest matches, or the biggest tournaments to basically ever be played in 1v1, especially the Assault Mine Final in EU. I mean, NA fanboys aren't here to defend a lot of the NA players based on the votes. I should be, your NA representative, but the reality is Assault Mine Final Win over in EU is much bigger. It's a few steps above Assault Mine Final Win in NA, and there was no crossover event. So we have to give Nasus credit. 2 wins, and 2 out of the 3 Assault Mines in EU is unbelievable. It's huge. And for that, he's worked his way all the way into number 5, despite not having much of anything else going for him in the rest of the tournaments. So, one thing you will notice is that nobody has had anything under Rule 1v1 Invitational. Nobody has anything here, and that is because the top 4 players in all of the year were the players that were invited to the Rule 1v1 Invitational. And I think that that's very clear. Maybe I'm slightly spoiling the rest of my list, but I think that it's pretty obvious who the top 4 was. Somebody said Nas is on Matey. To be fair, he's on Matey now, but he played on SK Gaming for the whole year when he was playing 1v1. So not even sure if he was officially announced on Matey on any of these tournaments. Maybe one of the Salt Mines he was, but he basically played the year on SK Gaming, so I just included the SK logo. So number 4. The order of these, I think, could be tossed around by a lot of different people. What did you guys go? You guys went Rawas, and then you went Moxie, and then Zen, and then Daniel, right? That's what you guys did? You guys went Rawas, Moxie, Zen, Daniel. That's from 1 to 4. My number 4 is Zen. I went with Zen at number 4. And the reason why Zen finishes at number 4 instead of maybe higher than the rest of them is for a couple reasons. One, finishing last in Rule 1v1 Invitational hurt him a little bit. Now, to be honest, I think he did perform okay. I think he got a win in like the group stage of it, but then in the playoffs, lost to Daniel and then finished basically last of the top 4. And then also was not able to win a Salt Mine, did get a second. So in the first Salt Mine, did lose to Moxie in the final, but didn't really have stellar Salt Mines afterwards, enough to maybe make him surpass a couple of the people that I felt had a better year overall. And he's also heavily carried, and the reason why he's still above anybody else in this list, like especially Nas, who won 2, is the Zen streak. The Zen streak was insane. It's almost enough, depending on where you put the Zen streak, you could even bump him up more. If you felt like the Zen streak was everything about 1v1 for this year, I could see you putting him almost to no end, depending on how much you care about it. Obviously, there must be an end because the Zen streak wasn't completely undefeated. But I have Zen at number 4. And number 3, I think, is potentially debatable. My number 3 and number 2, I bounced back and forth with a lot. I at first, I had it the other way around than the way I ultimately decided. But number 3 for 2023, I went with our boy Dan. Our boy Daniel at number 3. Assault Mine Stage 2 win, Assault Mine Final win, and a second place loss only to First Killer in Assault Mine 1 is about as good of a finish you could get from a 1v1er in North America. but it was just North American competition. When he played in Shotcast duels before Gamers 8, not only did he, drop out of Gamers 8 after not performing well, but he also didn't do too great in Shotcast duels considering his standard. He did well when the top 4 played against each other, got second, lost to Moxie in the Rule 1v1 Invitational. And when he played Ranked Royale, which was actually a pretty high level tournament, I would say, even though just because it was a bit smaller, I put it under these other ones. The North American one was First Killer, Jack, Daniel, and Wisty. Wisty had made it through the qualifiers, beating like Chronic and a few others that were, very high level. He was able to take them down. He ended up losing the crossover to Zen, to be fair. So that's why I put the little asterisk that he got first. We did do a crossover over the 2 winners. Zen won Ranked Royale in EU. Daniel won in NA. But pretty much all of this comes down to is this top right corner. This top right corner, winning Salt Mine Stage 2, winning the Salt Mine Final, being clearly the best player. I didn't include this match, but he also, after the end of Salt Mine Stage 2, played against Nas, the winner of Salt Mine Stage 2 in EU, and won that head-to-head pretty convincingly as well. So that's just another good win for him. He finished super, super strong, and throughout the whole year was one of the best 1v1ers. Did fine in the Rule 1v1 Invitational with these top 4 players. That's why I have him ahead of Zen. I think a lot of people could have Zen ahead of Daniel. I actually had Daniel for a bit, even higher, one higher rung up. But then after making this presentation, I was like, you know what? I can't do it. Daniel has to go down to 3. Daniel has to go down to 3. And the dogs are really excited. The dogs are really excited about the next one. Here, I'm gonna get a drink of water, add suspense while the dogs, For your guys' 1 and 2, you guys had Rawas 1 and Moxie 2, I believe. For my top 2, I have Moxie number 2. Moxie number 2, I have a feeling you guys know who's at number 1. Moxie winning Salt Mine Stage 1, winning Chalkcast Duels, and winning Rule 1v1 Invitational, I think are arguably enough to put him at number 1. There's a world in which you could make an argument for Moxie to be number 1 because Salt Mine Stage 1, the first Salt Mine, I think was one of the ones that was like most hype. Most people were ready to play for it. Maybe didn't have as much prep as the final, but it had a ton of hype, ton of attention, ton of pressure. He won that. He won Chalkcast Duels, the biggest crossover between EU and NA in any 1v1 tournament. He won that, huge. And then Rule 1v1 Invitational, the time when they put all these 4 best players together and had them play against each other, he won that as well. So those were huge wins. Huge wins. That's why it's no question number 2. It couldn't be any lower than that. But he did have a poor finish by his standards in Salt Mine Stage 2 in the final. To be fair, he lost those only to Zen and Rawas. And I say that he only got eliminated by Zen or Rawas. He had to get other losses in order to finish lower and have to play from lower parts of the bracket than he should have. But ultimately, when it came down to the elimination games, the times when Moxie normally clutches up, he did end up getting knocked out by either Zen or Rawas or a combination of the two, which is not, it's forgivable for the most part. But he had a bit of a stinker. Fearfest Jr. is one of the lowest, things I valued. But if you guys remember, Moxie, Nupo, Drowley, and Nas played in a tournament with all 4 of them. Moxie went 0-2 out of that and did get last at that. I gave him a yellow instead of a red for getting last because he was picked because he was one of the top 4 players at the time. So we can't really punish him too much. But it was a last place finish, which of course means I have a number 1, as you guys all have assumed, Rawas. Rawas at number 1. I think it's another year for Rawas at number 1. I feel like he ended the end of last year as the best player. I can't tell you for sure. I didn't think about it for the whole year of 2022. I think people who did rankings weren't really doing full year rankings like I tried to do this time around. But Rawas just does not have a bad result. He does not have a bad result ever. His worst results are, these tied for thirds, which he kind of got across the board, losing to only the best players. And then, in the Rule 1v1 Invitational, that was actually second to last. But still, great performance. He ended the Zen streak, which was huge. And this I valued really, really high. I think the cultural significance in 1v1 of the Zen streak and the fact that it ended with Rawas and everyone decided Rawas was for sure the best player in the world in a way that, nobody had that kind of resolution in a long time. You have to give credit to Rawas. And then Gamers 8. Gamers 8 came around. I didn't double check this number. This was off the top of my head. I double checked all the other numbers. I think he played 8 1v1s and he won them all. I think he went 8-0. But if somebody even wants to remind me that that's wrong, that's just off the top of my head. I realized I forgot to double check it. I double checked all the other ones. But I don't think he lost a single game, and I think he won 8 of them in 1v1. So a huge 1v1 performance on LAN, clutched out. We saw other players not being able to do that, right? Daniel plays great 1v1 online, could not do it at LAN. TRK plays great 1v1 online, couldn't get the win against, I think, Beast Mode. So Beast Mode was clutching out on LAN. Obviously, they're all best of ones, but the reality is, when it came down to it, Rawas did not lose. Did not drop any best of ones. His worst issue, he did win Fear Fiesta, which is another one of those crossovers between NA and EU. That's this middle one here. These two are similar tournaments, Chalk Cast Duels and Fear Fiesta. Mine was a bit smaller, it was single elimination. But he did win it. He won that over Moxie, and then I think he lost to Moxie in the semifinals of Chalk Cast Duels. So for the longest time, he would only ever lost to, I think it was Moxie or Daniel. Because those are the only two players he ever got losses to, which are the number 2 and number 3 on my list. And then towards the end of Salt Mine, he picked up a couple losses in pool play against new people like TRK and maybe Newpor. There was a couple more people that he lost to. It wasn't just Moxie and Daniel, but for many years, it had been only Moxie and Daniel. So that's my list. That's my list. Rawas, number 1. Puppy Puncher, thank you for the prime. Moxie should be number 1 easily, IMO. I think there's a good argument for that. I think there's a really good argument for that. I think Salt Mine Stage 1, Chalkcast, and Rule 1v1 Invitational. You can put Moxie at number 1, and it wouldn't hurt me. But one of the biggest differences between Moxie and Rawas is the Zen streak. Moxie was just another number in the Zen streak, and Rawas won in his match. Which you might be saying, why does a singular match hold so much value to you? I think for those of us who were watching the Zen streak and experiencing the Zen streak, we know that every 1v1er was going into their Zen match like it was RLCS. Like everybody just wanted to beat Zen so bad and was so locked in their effort to beat him. And Zen equally as locked in his desire to keep the streak going. Those were just some of the highest level 1v1 we've seen. And Moxie lost it. Rawas won it. And I think that that's just a humongous win. So that win plus not having any poor results really anywhere, losing to only the best players ever. And that's what got him number 1. I think that people could have stole it from him. Just to be clear, I think Zen, Moxie, a lot of other people could have stole it from him if they had more consistent Salt Mines. The fact that Nas stole the Salt Mine Stage 2 and Salt Mine Final from somebody who had a better year in the previous parts of the year, I think he locked in Rawas at number 1. Whereas if Zen had won one of these or 2 of these, if Moxie had won one of these or 2 of these, or he did win one of these, if he had won 2 of these, or even got like 2nd or 3rd maybe instead of, although it's hard to blame him, but because he got eliminated by the good players, but he was in the wrong spot because of seeding, because of losses to other people. So anyways, I went with Rawas. You guys went with Rawas too, so I shouldn't be trying to defend myself too much against you guys. And I added your list. This is my list versus your guys' list, which of course you guys know what that means. It's time to find out whose list is better. And only the Twitch chatters are going to get to vote. Chat or Fear? Whose list is better, chat? 1's in chat for your guys' list. 2's in chat for mine, and I'm going to make sure that this poll is not awkwardly placed. Here, I'll put it up here. Who's got the better list? Do you guys feel good about your own list, or did I do better? So let's see. Our big differences are we have the same top 4. I have Daniel over Zen because of just his Salt Mine finish was so good. I think his end of year was probably better, and that's why I had to give him the shout out. I mean, not doing so is basically saying North American Salt Mine just like doesn't matter at all, which I don't want to say. I do say EU Salt Mine is more important. I had Nas, and I'll be honest, I thought Nas, like I felt criminal almost putting Nas this low with how huge of wins he got. Those tournament wins, stage 2 and the final they're the biggest wins ever in 1v1. And so I was like, man, am I really going to put the guy who got the 2 biggest wins in 1v1 like almost ever at number 5. And ultimately I decided, yeah, he didn't pass over these guys. But you said even Nupo was ahead of him. I just swapped them. First Killer I had a little bit higher. Maybe that's my North American bias, but he did win Assault Mine Stage 1. You guys had Assault Mine winner as low as 9. It's a bit low for me because I think Assault Mine was huge. TRK, we're pretty much the same on TRK. Drowley I didn't have. Drowley was the guy that I didn't even really think of when I thought of like the top 15 or so. But Drowley was pretty good. Drowley was could even have been an honorable mention. He surged late, but I don't think he did enough to beat these people who had really good performances. Chronic was like rated the top 1 North American. Chalk Cast Duels was huge for him. And then I think Jack still had a great year. The problem is he flubbed it towards the end. But I know experiencing the year that Jack was playing like and considered one of the top players in 1v1 for the majority of the time. It wasn't until the end that really he dropped out. And Vatira is a great example of somebody who popped in, and I think that's a good pick if you're skewing the bias towards the end of the year. So that's where you guys went with. And it looks like you guys voted that my list was better. Oh, thank you so much, chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. You need a top 50. That's what I'm talking about. Melee to top 100. And I'd be down to put in the work to do top 100 if I knew a ton of other people were, and then we used the community rankings. But it's hard. I don't know if we have enough matches and cross matches across regions and stuff to do it exactly like Melee does. But I went and did this. I went and looked at the list that Johnny Boy made. Now, I went back and watched his video. I'm pretty sure his video was a current skill level, like current ability at the end of the year list. It was not a full list performance. So just to be clear, that means our list will probably be more similar than they would have otherwise been, because presumably the players who were the best at the end of the year probably did well in the following year. Whereas, the beginning of 2022 was probably completely ignored for the most part in Johnny's list. But this is the Johnny's list over here versus my list, which you guys voted was better than the other list. And it's interesting to see who stayed at the top. I mean, Rawas top for 2 straight years. Moxie jumping up. Jack dropping a bit down. Yan, I just think wasn't involved enough in tournaments once he went back to South America. So it's really hard to say he had a great year. Khaled, I don't think was as relevant. AJ, I don't think had a year that like Chronic had with Chalk Cast Duels. And then, Nupo in addition. Nas, a huge addition. And then First Killer maybe a bit better with that Salt Mine win. Is Yan even around? He is. He's playing in South America, and he's doing great there. But I believe that is it for my nice presentation